Hello, hello, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of HR at the Table. I'm Liv Carter. I'm your host, not your guest. If you've been on HR or at HR at the Table before, you've seen me before, and you may recognize our speaker as well. We'll jump into introducing her in just a second, but for now, few housekeeping items. First and foremost, and sometimes I forget to bring this up, but what is HR at the Table about? I just want to cover that really quickly. HR at the Table brings thought leaders and HR and TA professionals to the seat at the table. And we do an interview-like event. So kind of like a podcast, but then you get to see our faces. So kind of like a webinar in that way. A combination event, but really our goal today is to educate, to empower, to connect. So please in the chat, feel free to leverage that to connect with other attendees and also to connect with our speaker. We'll have her LinkedIn at the very end of today's event as well. But it's really an event. We want it to be interactive and engaging and to really empower everyone that joins. So with that said, a couple housekeeping items. First and foremost, I get this question all the time. Yes, we're recording. This is a live event and we're recording it so you can rewatch it in case there was a point that our speaker made and you want to go back to it. If you want to share it with your team, your colleagues, so on. The recording will be event. Typically, it's sent out next day, so you can keep an eye out for that as well as this event and all of our HR at the Table episodes are available for SHRM and HRCI credit. So if you're watching here live today, great. Hang on till the end and we'll get you those codes so you can add those to your SHRM and HRCI portal to redeem credit. If you're watching on demand or you want to check out previous HR at the Table episodes, there are instructions on the website. You can go to verifiedfirst.com and then HR at the Table under the resources tab. Lastly, and then I'll get into introducing our topic and our speaker. Ask questions, please. We love questions. I've got some questions prepped for our speaker here, given our topic, but a lot of times someone else is possibly thinking the same question as you and maybe just can't type it or isn't ready to ask the question. So please ask questions. We really want this event to be all about our attendees and you all to get the most out of it. So highly encourage questions. You could submit those either via the chat functionality, which you should see in your little Zoom dashboard, and or the question functionality. If I had to pick one or the other, I'd say the question because that notifies me right away and I can facilitate those and ask those live here. But chat also works as well as we're looking at that as well. On that note, let's introduce our topic here. So out of the box recruiting, unlocking potential in reskilled employees. I am super excited for this conversation. For those of you that have attended an HR at the Table before, in fact, if you attended not this last one, but the month before, our speaker, Keisha Ebbison, is back, and we're gonna dig deeper. We basically ran out of time in the last webinar, so we are digging in a little bit deeper, a little bit more specific topic, and I'm really excited to unpack this discussion. So before we get into it, Keisha, I'd love it if you could introduce yourself, share a little bit about your history, your background, just in case we've got new faces joining us today.
Oh, well, thank you, Liv. I am Keisha Beverly Ebbison. I have been a senior program business manager and working for Microsoft for 11 years. Exciting opportunity. I worked previously in other areas of business operations, HR, development of talent across pipelines, so not just in tech, but in the university setting as well as the sales setting. So I'm very excited and thankful for this opportunity to chat today. In my current role at Microsoft, I really focus on community building and employee engagement and employee experiences, particularly for the folks that are in our Atlanta region. But we are one global organization pushing forward. So I've got a lot of reach across different pipelines. So I'm excited to share my background in HR, which is over 15 years, and then a little bit more about why this is such a passionate topic that we would talk about it twice.
Yeah. Yes, I love that. And a lot of reach, a lot of experience. And I'm just so excited that you're spending your Tuesday afternoon with us. So on that, let's start with reskilling. I know we talked about last time. We talked about upskilling, reskilling, employee development, engagement, you mentioned. And we emphasized a lot on building growth cultures. For some of our members that didn't see your previous episode, can you share a little bit about today's topic and what it means to you, kind of that passion behind it?
Yeah, this is a really passionate topic for me as I don't know the career life cycle of most of the folks that are on this particular call. But even if you're newer in your career, when you think about upskilling, right, this is our opportunity to really create impact. How can you learn to do more to be able to feel fulfilled at what you're doing at work? Right. And when you think about opportunity for reskilling, you think about the opportunity of potentially changing what you originally started to do. And I think about this as designing your career, right? So I started at Microsoft, for example, working in university recruiting, really passionate about university students. But I got even more passionate over time around, our opportunity for creating recruiting pipelines. Like, how do we create opportunities to create amazing TA teams? How do we do more HR for HR work? And so I took an opportunity, took some courses, talked to some amazing leaders, right? And then branded out of university recruiting to HR for HR recruiting. And when you have an opportunity in any organization to like rebrand or relearn or reskill, right? You give yourself more longevity in a place that you really find and call home. So if you love your organization and you really want to spend a long career there, there's an opportunity that comes with changing and thinking about what's next. And a lot of folks who work in companies and corporations get really excited about the opportunity of this longevity. Oh, I started in sales and now I'm in marketing, but then I got this, life-changing experience and I want to work in HR. And so when you offer reskilling opportunities, people get to choose where they'd like to go next. And as someone in talent acquisition, it is always a delight to see when someone is able to come into an organization, learn as much as they can, do really well, and travel throughout the businesses.
Yeah, I loved all of that. I especially loved how you positioned reskilling and upskill designing your career and your future. I know at our organization, even on my team, I've got a couple of team members that have been in other departments. And it's been finding that spot where they're going to be an all-star, rock star, whatever kind of star, but that also screams their passion. Well, so I'm super excited to dig in a little bit more today. I'm curious with your experience and kind of your background, what would you say are some of the things that are or forces that are driving the need for reskilling today?
Yeah, one of the primary reasons is like the rapid pace of technology advancements. Like, as we think about technology and the skills that are required to operate and to be able to do business across the globe, technology is evolving consistently. And what that creates is at times a skills gap. And so when you have a skills gap, you have to start skilling. And that's what we're talking about on this particular call is that opportunity for skilling. So when I saw dropped in the chat, AI is definitely contributing, in my opinion. Yes, the rise of automation and artificial intelligence is transforming job roles and responsibilities, and in a positive way at times. Right? When you think about, like, for example, Copilot, which is a Microsoft product, it's a Copilot to help you to do what you currently do, and so that transformation and that openness, and we talked about this last time, that growth mindset, to like, how do I leverage technology to help me to be able to do my job even better, or to further my career, which is the train of thought most of us on this call are on. How do I enable others to be able to have their career transformed by utilizing the newest technology? Um, the automated tasks that are being done by AI, as the person dropped into the chat, there's going to be an opportunity for us to do data analysis, right? Learning about machine learning, digital literacy. So, if those areas or topics are exciting for you, this reskilling opportunity that a lot of organizations are seeing is probably at the top of the list. When you think about an opportunity for a culture of innovation and adaptability, the organizations we work for are thriving because they're becoming more innovative. And so when you become more innovative, there's a lot that comes with it. We're no longer just starting making widgets. I know that's funny for someone who's probably been in the workforce for quite some time, because widgets was a thing. But we're no longer just making widgets and selling them, right? We're figuring out why and how challenging it is for us to be able to make the best widgets there are. And when you think about the investing in for organizations from a TA perspective, imagine the excitement for a candidate that hears like, oh, they have reskilling opportunities. So if I start doing something that I've been doing for 15 years, I've been in finance for 15 years. I love finance, but I always wanted to become, a developer, and they hear that your organization has a program that later on they can transform and do something different, how exciting is that for them as well?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And you really covered the basis there on the need, and why reskilling's even a thing. I'll put in quotes today. I'm gonna kind of go on the flip side now and ask a question. Uh, what are some of the common challenges, right, organizations face? Because all of that sounds great, right? When you identify the need and the purpose, and even from a candidate engagement and attraction, talent acquisition attraction level, sounds great. But what are some of the common challenges that you see organizations facing when trying to implement reskilling programs or prioritize reskilling?
I think some of the challenges, depending on how large or small your organization is, a lot of folks always start with funding, right? We can't afford it. Because how are we gonna where are we gonna get the resources? Who will be a part of this process? Like,
Right.
we don't have the resources financially. Potentially, organizations could say we don't have the time, because creating a reskilling program means time, and right now we're really focused on our bottom line, and so there's that, right? So those are two big ones that I hear often. The third sometimes can be like leadership buy-in, right? Because when you say I want to start a reskilling program, right? It's like, okay, well, tell me why. And so that
Yeah,
itself is like a tough question to answer when you, and a lot of HR professionals on this call will probably agree with me. And when you think it's so obvious, right? It feels so clear, but you really do have to think through the strategy of sharing your opportunity for creating a reskilling program within your organization.
absolutely. Yeah, and Megan actually put in a question that I feel like speaks
Mm.
really um, aligns really well with what where we're at discussion wise. Megan shared, love the designing your career statements a little bit earlier, and then how can one do that effectively, but for a free to cheap budget? You mentioned cost there. If one's company doesn't support their development. Any initial thoughts on, how to kind of design your career statement or help others design their career statement effectively on a low budget? I know that's a loaded question there, but
Yeah, but I love the question and thank you for
great question.
asking it. The one thing I love is to be scrappy. Scrappy Keisha, like it is definitely a thing. Because getting scrappy, what it does for you is it shows you how much opportunity you have. It's nice, to work into an organization that has a lot of funding and can do things easily, but it's also very cool and very exciting to get scrappy and think about how do you do this. So I was thinking about this from our last call because I didn't mention this, but creating like groups, right? We didn't talk about like employee resource groups. So let's say you have 6 people in your organization that have been working in finance, for our example, for 10 years. And that was what they were really passionate about. But they're also now interested, again, in going into a space like marketing. And you have 10 people in marketing who love what they do. And so, how can those 10 people work alongside the finance folks to transfer skills amongst each other, right? How can they start to develop like these scrappy programs where they're teaching like the basics of these particular lines of business, to each other or to others in the organization? Like when you get scrappy and intentional, it does two things. One is when you really do start with those people in finance who are interested in marketing, what you are doing is you're making sure you have the right target audience. So, for example, if you go into an organization and you roll out this big opportunity, like, oh, we'd love to teach everyone who's interested of turning into a finance professional about finance, you don't know if you have enough interest. But when you start people first, right? The
Mm.
people that you're working with, 100% are aligned to the mission. They clearly feel like they're right now ready to start that type of work. And then what you do is you have a large amount of employee engagement because it's being driven by employees. The second piece is the folks that are teaching. That gives them, again, satisfaction levels, high satisfaction levels, that they're able to share what they've learned to help others along their journey. So when you think about reskilling opportunities, you can start there, but it's still going to take financially some other tools that we'll talk about later in this conversation about actually making sure that what folks are learning and their learning paths are actually what's necessary to be able to get the job done like in the future. And especially if it's built internally, it's going to be targeted to exactly what may be needed by teams that are in need.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. It sounds like starting with identifying the needs or being curious about the desires of employees and the direction they would like to go potentially.
Yes, for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, great question, Megan. And to the rest of the audience, keep them coming. We love questions here. Real quick, before we move on to talking about kind of reskilling and tying it to out of the box recruitment, in your opinion, what are some of the most essential components of an effective reskilling strategy or program?
So, yes, and I'm excited to share this with you. So, if you're a note taker, this is your opportunity to shine because I love taking notes, especially when I know that they are going to be like rehashed or shared with others. So, I do have some outlined strategic program initiatives that I think are components to having a successful program. One we chatted about briefly, which is clear objectives and goals. So you want to make sure that for the skilling program that you create, that it's designed and aligned to the organization's mission and vision. That's something we haven't mentioned yet on this call. So the mission and vision of your organization is key. So when you're thinking about creating a reskilling program, you want to make sure that it aligns with the mission and vision of what your company is looking to succeed and to do in the future. The second is you're going to want to make sure that you have a comprehensive needs assessment. So you're going to conduct this assessment by utilizing any types of surveys that can figure out like where there are skill gaps. This involves like analyzing workforce capabilities and identifying areas where reskilling is actually necessary. Super important. If you have a talent management team, partnering with them, they can probably share a little bit of that with you. This is internal within HR. So I'm sure that like in your organization, somehow, some way, they are monitoring current skill gaps. Shout out to Plum because I did really enjoy learning a little bit more about their product and what they do in terms of identifying skill gaps and helping with talent management and employee engagement. Excellent products from what I saw. I have not personally used it, but I definitely listened to the demo and heard a lot about it. And I thought it was a really great resource that's out there in the universe. The third
Mm.
piece, I think, is targeted learning paths. So you're going to want to tailor different opportunities based on career stages. In my example, I use someone who's been there 15 years, but what about the person that's only been there 5? So you want to ensure that employees have relevant skills and trainings based on where they are in their career, and that the trainings are technical and they have a way to make sure that they are assessing for the development. So not to say like pass fail, but you do want to assess like that they got what they were learning out of that course. Accessibility is really important. So you want to make sure that it's not just meeting in the cafeteria at 2 o'clock on Thursdays, because some people that may have parenting responsibilities or grandparenting or plant responsibilities might not be able to make that. So you want to make sure that the timing allows for accessibility for anyone to continue the course. Once the course is complete, you want continuous learning. So not only do you just learn what you've learned, but how do you continue to learn? Because again, you can't pack necessarily 10 years worth of experience into like a 2 week course. So like, how do you continuously learn, grow, achieve? I love creditly badges. I love like all those rock star signature opportunities that we have across. So we want to make sure that that gets done, as well as the final pieces of the strategy are really around supportive leadership. You want it's always you create this program, you got this wonderful idea. It happens to us all the time in HR, and we need to make sure our leaders support the work that we're doing so they can then enable others and show that they are behind this work with a lot of leader led opportunity when it comes to people that are in organizations as employees that are excited. They get even more excited when the leaders are aligned and they can share their experiences. And we'll talk later around feedback and collaboration, but those are the major pieces of criteria I think are important when you think about creating a program that's going to work.
Definitely. So glad you said note-taking opportunity.
Yes.
Because that was so good and so detailed. And I know we're going to unpack portions of that today. And some of those we touched on in our last recording too. So if you, audience, if you haven't taken a look at that, would highly encourage you, verified first, and then the HR at the table tab under resources is how you can access that. Um, Keisha, I'm watching the clock and I know we ran out of time last time, so I'm gonna keep us moving here and talk about out of the box recruiting. And I guess let me start with like how does out of the box recruiting what does it even mean in context of reskilling, right?
Yeah, so when I think of out of the box recruiting and reskilling, I think about it in two ways, right? I think about it from an internal talent marketplace. So when you think about like how do we recruit from within? And so, how do we get folks in these programs to now think about other opportunities across the marketplace that are not being fully utilized based on the amount of skills that they have, especially if your organization has military population or anyone else that may have had skills that were designated for a different purpose initially, but now they're in a functional role. They probably have skills that are there that can be used again. The second piece around that for me is also when you think of external talent pipelining. When you're looking for talent, changing your keyword searches, finding talent, not just based on the original criteria for the role, but some of these reskilled criteria, looking for talent that's been in organizations, depending on what talent platform you're looking at, that have been in organizations for 10 or 15 years versus people who are currently working in the space, but maybe someone who is newer to the space but has longevity in organizations. So when I think of out of the box, I think that that's a really big opportunity across the board.
Yeah. And I know we're going to touch on the technology piece a little bit later on and how you might be able to leverage that. But I'm curious what methods or approaches you found effective for, like you mentioned, identifying and recruiting reskilled talent.
Surveys and questionnaires for sure. That has been really big in my space. Figuring out how we can distribute those to see who's interested. Focus groups and interviews as well. Definitely there. Feedback forms, observation and monitoring. All of those pieces are general pieces that I've seen be really, really useful in terms of figuring out, how are people interested and what the next steps could be.
Right, right. Sounds like I mentioned it earlier, but again, curiosity, asking the questions. Yeah, wanting that communication, that open communication and feedback, which again, I know we're gonna really dig into deeper here in a little bit. Um, Kind of going back to our first event that we had just a couple months ago, and we talked a lot about having a growth mindset, in your culture, in your organization culture. Can you maybe share some ways, to help our organizations or our attendees kind of shift their perspective on hiring to include reskilled candidates or looking for, potentially reskilled candidates?
I love LinkedIn. I'm a huge LinkedIn user. Shout out to anyone else who's using LinkedIn. There's lots of other talent platforms out there, Indeed, and many others that are doing wonderful work. And I'm thankful for all of the organizations that are helping to pull talent in because at this point we are really in a need for getting exposure to all opportunities. One opportunity I think that's there is showcasing like success stories of reskilled talent. So when you think about that growth mindset, you think about your culture, you think about what you typically share. There's an opportunity. We do a lot of great storytelling of people's journeys, like, oh, tell us how you got to where you are. But let's do a different opportunity in showcasing the success stories of how you were successfully reskilled and advanced your career. How did you do this while managing your own lifestyle and the things that are important to you? Promoting that learning culture. We talked about the growth mindset, like leaning into like you're coming into this organization. The expectation is that you clearly are able to do what we're asking you to do, but there's also the opportunity for us to teach. So
Hmm.
I think that is the second piece. Like, not only are you walking in to an organization to show and tell everything you've done, but you're also here to learn and share across.
Yeah. And I'm gonna kind of pause us there for a second because I like how you mentioned how you can kind of that approach in recruitment or telling the story, right? And that impact on talent acquisition and the candidates that maybe you draw attention to. But I would imagine those success stories are only successful or the stories that they are because of support, right? And help and kind of encouraging reskilling and development. So I'm curious kind of what training or support, and this is probably a loaded question. Can't tell. I kind of like to ask those every now and then. But what does training or support look like that you offer, employees to reskill them and help them succeed in their new roles or potential new roles?
Some of the things that can be offered in general really revolve around this opportunity of like centralized learning plans, if that makes sense. So you come into an organization, it feels really nice to know I've got a 6 week learning plan. In week one, I'm like even gamifying it. Like, that's one thing that I think I wanted to mention, I didn't mention before, is like gamifying the opportunity, having levels that you can achieve and unlock to be able to show the advancement of your opportunity within your career, to be able to get to the next levels that I have seen even in my own career, right? To really give that drive and that push going forward. So that's one to two ways that I think you can really unlock that opportunity or share back with each other what's there. The other thing is just really asking employees what they want to experience. We do a lot of pre-planning for everyone in terms of like, okay, what are some ways organizations could shift, their perspective of hiring? But like, what do you want to see?
Hmm.
What would make you feel like you are achieving your goals? And let's work back. Let's work forward, right, to what you would like to achieve.
Yeah. I imagine that that encourages even more buy-in from the employee themselves.
Yeah, when it's your idea, you're
Yeah.
100% bought in.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. I want to kind of elaborate a little bit more on that question and ask, what have you seen that works with like engaging other leaders? So taking your finance example, got an employee in finance that's curious about marketing and potentially making a shift over into the marketing world. Have you? gotten with the marketing leader and said, marketing, finance leader, like what does it look like for marketing to kind of walk with that employee? Or does it make sense on the leadership level, leadership management level? I'd just be kind of curious what you've seen has worked or hasn't worked in terms of bringing in leadership to support the reskill of an employee.
I think what I've seen in general over the past like 15 years has definitely been data driven decisions. So
Yeah.
it's one thing for us to sit here, at two something and say, yeah, we've got five people in finance who might be interested. I'm sure there's somebody in marketing that would want to switch over. Data drives everything. So, like, in general, like, if you would like leadership support in what you're doing, what's upcoming, you're going to need the data to start to have that conversation. Transparency too in communication around what people are like, what their experiences are like in their current roles is another thing, right? We think about potentially the transformation or like the reorging of a lot of
Mhm.
businesses because of like a lot of quick fast change that's happening. And so when you are creating solutions, which is what these programs are developing to do, right, to create solutions to problems that, or challenges rather, that are going to naturally happen just because of the nature of business. I think leaders love to hear that. And then also the predictability of potential optimistic positive changes, right? That can really, you know, get ahead of what could potentially be another change that'll be an innovation that could actually change your organization. So if your organization may be purchasing or buying another organization, right, they're going to be adding to their employee population, and that actually allows you to do another type of reskilling program, right? Like maybe there's pieces of the puzzle there that you can kind of combine and put together in terms of how you share that data back with the leaders, because data is
Yeah.
truly how these decisions, even the reskilling programs we talk about, from the beginning to the end, really need to sit in that data space.
Yeah. Data, data, data. And we're going to talk about technology and maybe there's something there and connection to data and analytics, right? But um, before we kind of move on to talking about feedback and communication, something that we just briefly started to talk about earlier, you started to talk about kind of the changing workforce dynamics, right? The need in this space. I'm curious on your thoughts on like how has the role of talent acquisition or the responsibilities of talent acquisition evolved in response to changing workforce dynamics, right? Especially when it comes to out of the box recruiting and reskilling, kind of high level, what has that looked like?
I think what's exciting about talent acquisition, even though I haven't sat in a recruiter seat in a while, but I'm always watching, right? And will always and forever be a person who connects people to opportunities. I think that for me, what talent acquisition is doing, or what they can really do well, is to share what they're seeing.
Mm,
So if you are noticing, especially on different platforms or different forms of like media, if you're seeing that employees are doing a lot of upskilling, I know like in the pandemic, we noticed everyone was e-cornelling, right? The organizations were partnering with educational institutions to provide what they know based on workforce data is going to be what's new, right? And so
yeah.
when you see and notice those things and you're saying like, I've got 10 candidates for this open project manager role, and 9 out of 10 have now gone to Cornell, you can say like, okay, there's something in the system where people are feeling like they really are passionate about this area, and we have an opportunity in our organization, and we're noticing those people typically have longevity in organizations, and they have like some work history, and they can really share like a competitive edge to what we have on our side, right? And so when you think about it that way, TA has an opportunity of sharing the trends that they see happening in the
Mhm.
applications and in the one-on-one communication. So another great example from a TA perspective is if you're talking to candidates and the 5 out of 10, 5 out of 10 are like, is this role remote? Like, I'm not, just so you know,
Yep.
like, I am not coming in the office. Like, these
Yeah.
plans, these are my people. Like, I have relaxed my anxiety. I'm not coming in. That's a data point. And it's a big data point when you think about what we just discussed when you're creating a reskilling program. Because if you set a budget to spend $5,000 on food and catering and everybody wants to be home, now the leaders are looking like, we spent all this money, no one showed up at these meetings, like, was this even worth it? TA
Yeah.
does have an opportunity to share the rhythms or the sound bites of what the newest folks coming into the workforce are looking for. And then folks that are working in HR specific roles in the business or using pulse survey data can share what employee sentiments look like to say, okay, this is what employees want to experience consistently. We all are one HR. So we're going to have to come together to create this type of programming.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the perfect transition to talk about feedback and communication, open
Yeah.
communication. But I loved how you touched on um, TA kind of being the start of that communication on what they're experiencing with candidates, what they're seeing, and how that
Yeah.
translates to your current workforce, your employees, right? And sure the patterns of engagement and retention there as well. So I want to dig in a little bit deeper on communication here. High level, kind of broad question, but in your eyes, what is the importance or what aspects of feedback and communication are important in an effective reskilling program? Why does it matter?
Well, it matters because you want to create a safe environment for people to feel comfortable sharing feedback. That's not, in my, humble opinion, that's number one. Because the more comfortable people feel that they can share their feedback, they will, right? We want to understand, like everyone says, feedback's a gift, right? And it is, right? But how do we deliver that gift? Making sure whatever tools or mechanisms that we deliver, that it allows for both. It allows for the feedback that is clearly truthful, and that can be, seen in a very positive light. And then also, if there's feedback that's constructive, that's going to help to make a change for this person, for our organization to be even stronger, that we give that constructive feedback, right? And then that we ask to receive feedback. I think it is very important that, as much as and very conscientious and eager, opportunists and those in HR know, we have employees who will always say, do you have any feedback for me? Can you share any feedback? But we want it to get to a point where this environment is so safe that the other person who feels protected to always be the responder to feedback questions feels like they can ask, well, do you have any feedback for me?
Mm,
And that, I think, is how you know you've gotten to a great point in feedback
yeah,
opportunity.
absolutely. Any tools or strategies that you have found effective for gathering feedback?
Yeah, I think so personally, the best opportunities I've had, and I have to smile when I say it, has been in like those pulse check in person or virtual room now opportunities. So I do love a good survey, like I said, and I do love a good, questionnaire that's sent, and I will send it back out, especially, a lot of organizations do tie it back to some type of like DoorDash or, you get something when you give something, and
Yep.
incentives are cool and I appreciate them. It does show that there's a lot of care given there. But I really enjoy the focus group feedback where we're in the room. It's a safe space. You can let your hair down. You can say, this, I just got this badge. I'm so happy about it, a human facilitation badge. Because the opportunity for it to be human centered feedback based on what the human is experiencing versus what we want to hear or what we're trying to fix, and really bring it back to the person, are some of the best spaces. So that's what I would say, is really having that opportunity for like facilitated feedback sessions, observation and monitoring. So if you do get something that's constructive, like, my team atmosphere feels a little intimidating as a, second year employee at this organization, take an opportunity to do some monitoring, invite people to the team meetings, see what's happening across, so you can understand if the reskilling of employees on the team, if they feel accepted.
Mm.
Because remember, again, if you got 13
Huh.
people that have been doing this for 25 years and you've got someone who took, 6 rounds of like reskilling and they joined the team, we want it to be a growth mindset and a very open culture, but there's the truth of the matter is, at times people can feel like nervous to share that type of work with someone so new. So those are kind of some of the things that I think are at the top of my list.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you started to touch on the culture piece, which we talked about a little bit, in the last episode in that growth culture, growth mindset culture. But I'd imagine with feedback to and communication, just to encourage open and honest communication, relies quite a bit on the culture that you create, right? And the environment that you create, as you mentioned. Um, I'm kind of curious in your perspective, what are some of those key components of a culture that encourages healthy feedback or, open feedback?
Multiple channels of feedback. Um, so promoting a culture that, if I heard your question correctly, promoting a culture that allows for that type of open feedback, there has to be multiple channels of feedback. Not everyone can get feedback face to face. Like
Yeah.
this, depending on their past life experiences, right? Even if it's constructive and positive, it can be a lot. So if there's an opportunity for smaller organizations, a suggestion box, if that's still a thing, or a direct
Yeah.
communication like with managers hosting potential office closed office hours where you can sign up. Remember back when you were in college, like some folks really felt like in bigger environments, like being able to just know my manager's available for feedback at that time. Um, just utilizing the feedback in those different types of ways. Also, feedback can be very positive, creating a recognition program for when employees do highlight, the work that they're doing amongst the team, where people can praise them and give them positive reinforcement. That is equally as important. I know we tend to always think of feedback as in always constructive and sometimes negative seeing feeling, but there's also that opportunity for the positive side.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, we do have a question, not necessarily connected to communication or feedback, but I want to make sure we give time to it real quick. So Burita, I hope I am
Mhm.
pronouncing that correctly. On a low budget, what has worked for recruiting in a rural area besides networking with facilities? Any thoughts, Keisha?
Yeah, so yes, definitely. When you're in an area, again, that doesn't necessarily have the most bustling population for being able to do meetups, it's going to go right back to the tech. It's going to be like, what can you create at scrappy times using high functioning technology? So it's going back to that LinkedIn opportunity. It's going back to the platforms that are created, especially on a budget. There are some free opportunities for you and I and everyone to be able to create communities online, in spaces. And how do we find those folks? And again, utilizing technology like Copilot, utilizing technologies across the platforms of AI will allow you to figure out the best ways to find those people, or some of the best ways to find those people. But it really is going to be, from what I have seen, really a big opportunity that can be developed with the people you have. So if you're on a budget, get the people you have together, and we're going to group think on how we're going to be able to create these opportunities going forward, if that makes sense. And then we're going to just keep one to one to one, and we're just going to grow the opportunities, and we're going to go down the list of each way that we can make potential headway in talent acquisition in areas where it's not easy to just meet up.
Yeah. Great question, Burita, and great answer, Keisha. And I know we're coming to the point where we're going to talk about technology here in just a little bit. Before we move on to talking about sustainability, right, and some strategies to make employee development sustainable, I've got just two more questions here on feedback and communication in terms of a reskilling program. Um, First one is what role does leadership play in establishing and maintaining this culture that is open and encourages feedback?
I think it's in recognition and rewarding. Um, recognizing and rewarding employees for what they've done. I think, and I could probably say this for the folks that are watching or rewatching, we are all managing a ton of things at one time. It doesn't even, if I paused the call and said, like, what's changing in your life right now, every person likely has something that is about to change, just recently changed, or is in the process of change. And so when you think about what we bring to work every day with us, and you think about this opportunity to now take on this new thing of like reskilling or upskilling of employee groups, you're taking on even more than you already have. And so, one thing that leaders can do very easily is to recognize what employees are actually going through each and every day to be able to make these milestones happen, and then rewarding them and letting the reward match what the employees are looking for. I think this is a very big opportunity, especially for small organizations. A lot of times we hear reward, we think of financials, like we think of potentially stock, or we think of like bonuses, and we think of those things like that. But really asking again employees, what does recognition look like you? Does it look like for you? Does it look like a plaque? Does it look like an email? Does it look like, an opportunity for you to have lunch with a leader? Like that you would like to sit in their seats? Does it look like a what is it, a coaching? This one I really want to make sure I say out loud too. Does it look like putting these folks into a coaching situation that is sponsored by the leader, meaning like taking the folks in your reskilling and upskilling program and allowing them to have a professional coach from your organization, hopefully maybe someone internal in HR, who's going to help them think about their career long term, recognizing and rewarding with them with something that they seem is important for their next steps.
Yeah, and that was perfect because my second question was going to be around how do we celebrate reskilling and those achievements, but I think you touched on quite a few there, and what I heard was really find out again, be curious about your employees and what it looks or feels like to be recognized or celebrated.
I can say this really quickly. At Microsoft,
Yeah.
the feedback is consistent. So I think you may have asked this before, or maybe been thinking of like some successful opportunities that I have seen happen in the feedback space. It's
Yeah.
going to be consistent. So it's every Friday we're going to get feedback. Like, even if we feel like it's only been a couple of days, a week, every Friday, we're going to get feedback because we're going to measure. Because every time you measure, you have an opportunity to really see the growth. And if the growth was minimal over time, then maybe you can add a gap. So, again, if you create a skills program or skilling program that has a six week opportunity and you're checking in every week, and weeks 2 to 4, there's not enough change, then now in V2, in version 2 of this, you don't necessarily need that moment in time in for weeks 2 to 4. Now you need it in week 1, you need it in week 4. So your program gets better as you take those continuous opportunities for feedback there, to be able to go forward, and also create it in a data driven dashboard so it's not manual.
Yeah. Yep. And back to the data piece. It's a great call out there. So I know we've got about 12 minutes or so. So we're gonna hit on kind of one more topic, which is more about sustainability. So employee development strategies that are, more sustainable here. And I want to jump into some of the elements that, you might consider essential for kind of sustainability. But before, I'm actually going to move us up to talk about technology because we've been
Mm.
talking about the data. There's, questions that have been around it and you've mentioned LinkedIn and whatnot. So for our audience, I'm going to launch a poll question. This is a poll question that we ask in all of our HR at the Table episodes. So if it's your first time, here you go. You get to answer it. If it's your second, third HR at the table, feel free to answer it. But basically, this feeds into our annual guide or research report that we put together at the end of the year. So while everyone's kind of answering that, Keisha, I'm curious with your, experience, what role does technology play in supporting reskilling initiatives?
It makes it accessible. It
Mm.
makes it accessible. That's it. It
Yeah.
makes it accessible. It can make it fun. It can make it enjoyable. It can make it transferable, like accessibility, all in the world of accessibility, 100% when it comes to utilizing technology, tracking and analytics. So the stronger the technology you're using, you'll be able to track and measure the impact of what your program is doing, how many hours people are spending in the program if they're sharing it with others. There's lots of learning platforms. I know we're talking about technology here, like Viva, Microsoft Viva Learning is one. LinkedIn has a learning hub. Lots of organizations, like we talked about the organizations in educational institutions that are allowing for those opportunities that are online. That's definitely another space as well.
Yeah. And it looks like, looking at the poll question, kind of skills assessment and learning management systems are the top two there. So I'm gonna close that up. And yeah, and thank you all for answering that there. Um, I know we talked about the budget piece, right? And technology. Any thoughts on where to start with technology and reskilling? How do you kind of evaluate or determine if a certain solution makes sense for you?
So we're gonna start that with like conducting the skills gap analysis, and that's done like within HR. So
Mm,
before we start talking to like employees, potentially, it may be a good opportunity to identify the current skill gaps that may be there and required for your organization to move forward in the future. The second thing, I think, the second actionable item will be kind of to develop a targeted learning path, right? So, how are folks going to learn about these different skills? Like, are we going to create learning paths that are tailored for different roles, different career stages, to ensure like relevant and effective training? So, that's where I think the second opportunity is. And thirdly, provide like accessible learning resources. That again, we talked about the technology. We wanted this to be able to be done online, but also if you need human connection, there's an offering of a workshop. There's hands-on trainings, make trainings accessible for the needs of the employees that are in your space.
yeah, absolutely. And I love how simple you made it. One, two, three there, especially for any of our note takers out there. Super helpful there. And to kind of go back to the piece that we were talking about, technology, yes, data, right? Are there any metrics or data points that you've seen have been helpful to kind of evaluate or communicate the success of reskilling efforts?
Yeah, so the opportunity for seeing how what the employee appetite is, so using data analytics to figure out like how many employees registered for the program, how many were sustained throughout those 6 or 8 weeks of the program, really creating your KPIs or your, key results that you're looking for the program and monitoring it throughout the program using a data analytics platform, I think is number one if you have that capability.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's honestly that is the answer. That's what
Yeah.
you're gonna do it before you even start. So the before you started portion was around like, was there this level of interest? Right now we provide the service. Do people actually register and sign up? Then once the service starts, how many people were able to saying it was it too high a level. That happened to me before. I created a whole entire training in AI, and it was an amazing training, but you actually had to have some previous knowledge, and some of the folks who are really interested in AI don't have a lot of AI knowledge, and so
Mm,
they had to do more research overnight to be able to manage through the course well, and they did. But knowing that I know that, I would have made like pre-reading opportunities or tutoring or what we call study halls. That is another key, like, especially
mm,
with these reskilling programs, like creating study halls virtually or in person where people can get help as they do the program, or even get encouragement as they do the program.
yeah, yeah, I love that. You almost make a cohort kind of community like feel with that too. Yeah, that's a great one. I know we're coming up on time here, and I know everyone on the call probably has another meeting that they have to go to after this, and we're so grateful they carved out an hour for us. But Keisha, if you had something that you hope someone in the audience or audience took away from today's discussion, I know we could have gone hours longer, but what would be kind of one thing or kind of a golden nugget that you hope someone could take with them after today's event?
I think the thing that I'd love for people to take with them, especially as HR professionals, we focus on human capital. We care about what happens to folks in their careers, and we also care about, each other in HR. And so when we create these opportunities like upskilling programs and reskilling programs, not only are we finding ways to be innovative for ourselves and for HR as a function, but we're also creating so much opportunity for people in their day-to-day lives, right? We're giving someone another 10 years in their organization, another 2 years doing what they thought they loved, but now they're ready for something different. We're setting the opportunity that there is so much more to be had. Um, that's there, and it's also so much community building. So that's the last thing I'll say, is I'm thankful you put my LinkedIn up here. Tribe Life
Yeah.
ATL is my Gmail account. I'm on the other socials too, like Facebook and Instagram with Tribe Life ATL. But I really do believe that each of us are one tribe, especially in HR, because we truly care, and we can make such a big difference if we put data first. We have the opportunity to create programs that allow for longevity in whatever paths anyone decides to take, because it's their own decisions. We can't control that. But what we can control is opportunity. So let's go ahead and just keep creating wonderful opportunities for folks every day.
Love that. I love that. And thank you for letting us put your LinkedIn here, audience. You can scan the QR code to connect with Keisha. And again, you can see the previous episode, verified first, and then HR at the table in the resources tab. Keisha, I just want to say thank you again for joining us for a second time on HR at the table. And just all the insight. I said this last time, and I'm gonna do it again. I always emphasize the recording because I'm gonna rewatch the recording. I'm always wishing I could take notes, but just trying to be present with you. But so much insight, and just really appreciate your time today.
Like I said, I appreciate your time as well, and everyone who has watched this call. And again, as like a mom of how many, and a mom of how many who's had to like rebrand and do a career a couple of times over, but all in the space of doing what I'm really passionate about. I'm so thankful that people care enough to try to do this for others, and so I think it's a good foot forward for Verify First and for HR at the table.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. And for those of you that are looking for Sherman HRCI credit, now's your chance to take a screenshot,
Yay!
take a picture. You'll need to take that and put it into your account or your portal, and or connect directly with Sherman HRCI. But the codes are there. Again, we recorded today's session. It'll be available shortly after the live event. If any questions, feel free to reach us at contact@verifiedfirst.com. And stay tuned for our next episode, HR at the Tables Monthly. So, third Tuesday next month, we will be back here and hosting another great discussion with another great speaker. Thank you all again. And once I press this end webinar red button, there will be a little survey. We'd love to hear your feedback. We talked about it today. We'll take it, please. So please provide any feedback, questions, and or if there's topics you want to hear us discuss. HR at the Table is curated, especially for all of you. So thank you again, and hope everyone has a great rest of their week. Thanks again, Keisha.
Have a great week. See you later.
Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.